Hello and welcome to what is, I think, the first podcast, at least where I get really, really excited for the new game, because we're going to talk about how to start what is now FC 24. And with me, I have a panel of guests with, I don't know, probably like 40 years combined experience of playing Ultimate Team or something crazy like that. We have, first of all, AirJapes, of course, FUT Legend. Hello, welcome back.
Hello, Ben. Glad to be back. And I have certainly started over probably a decade at this point worth of Ultimate Teams in my day. So seen a lot of different things. But this year there are a couple of curveballs that I am still kind of wrapping my brain around in terms of what I think about it. So it's kind of an interesting one to discuss.
Yeah, there are things like Evoloutions to throw into the mix for this prep episode. I mean, they're things we can't fully predict, but we can have a go at maybe giving some early recommendations or maybe what to think about around those. We will introduce our next two guests. We have, as you'd expect, JoshXLS. Hello, welcome back.
Yes, thank you for having me. When I got the message from you with the little kind of sheet of what we want to talk about, I got very excited. I'm big time looking forward to the new game. And there's been a few leaked ratings that I may have been perusing over for the last few hours. So can't wait.
Definitely. And up next we have Nate, FUT Accountant, who's been on quite a few of these over the years. Welcome back as well.
Thanks, Ben, for having me back. I'm really excited too, because the conversations we're going to have today will just continue to jumpstart my prep thinking and just, planning for the next restart of Ultimate Team.
Yeah, and actually we should start with what we're planning to be doing ahead of the web app release. Any sort of planning or thinking about maybe the database or anything along those lines? Let's start with you, Japes. I mean, are you already planning starter teams and things like that?
I don't think I start making my team per se. Like, that's not really where my brain goes. I think my brain goes to, if I am going to try to make the most of the web app, then it's the question of, is there a league that I decide that I, want to learn price, market wise, to do some trading in? Because I think for most people, learning the whole market and all of the different card prices is a pretty large undertaking. Not for many on this podcast who are devoting huge amounts of times to it, but for the average FIFA Joe, you can go about learning the prices for one league. And so I try to pick leagues that I think will either start to build more hype, that, going into the first weekend league, because they have some attractive, combos of players that you can put in there, or just a league that I am maybe interested in playing with. But I think this year, I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around it the same way because of the introduction of the women's leagues. Because there are a lot of, women's players in the supposed unofficial, official looking ratings that are seemingly out there that could be doing some damage early on, especially some attackers, some wide players. And I am not sure how the market is going to react to them yet. So I think that's you're starting to, at this point, develop a hypothesis on how you think the market is going to react to certain ratings. The easiest one is which players are going to link nicely with 𝘵𝘃𝗀𝘃. That's a baseline thing that you could say, I believe these players are going to link nicely with 𝘵𝘃𝗀𝘃 and they're going to get some hype to get him full chemistry. I can maybe keep tabs, but that's a very popular move. And so I think you're looking for ones that are, a tier less competitive, if you're me, to be able to try to start to learn. But the introduction of the women's players for me, I'm not sure how to navigate it, but I think there are some guests on this panel that might be able to help with that.
Yeah, actually, we can ask Nate about that, because it is fascinating to see what happens. The women's leagues, well, they don't probably provide the best defensive options, particularly centre-backs, based on height, really. But there are really, really good players in other positions that people will want to use. So you could see people going down more of a hybrid route than perhaps they would typically, where they'd choose a league and just keep progressing. It's probably going to be, or potentially could be, a bit different this cycle.
Yeah, Ben, I totally agree where you're coming from. And as I look at the stats of the top-rated women's players in the game, I'm noticing that some of the best ones are from those top clubs, PSG, Chelsea, and especially Barcelona. Like Putellas, Bonmati, and Graham Hansen are all from the Barcelona women's team, and they link directly to the Barcelona men's team. I think that's going to be one of the easiest ways early on people will be able to link those cards. Is you think about having like Putellas in your midfield with Pedri, or maybe Lewandowski gets in and Bonmati, you get a Barcelona link between those two players since it works in that way. Yeah, they're not the same league, but they're the same club, and that gets you chemistry. So that's where I think the market will be impacted straight away, is maybe some Barcelona players, maybe a couple of Chelsea players that are, the more meta side on the men's side of things will have a bit of an impact in price upwards because of these overpowered looking women's cards coming in.
Yeah, that is one of the kind of odd parts of this. I even think in the Spanish league, in Liga F, there's a couple of clubs in there that aren't linked to a men's club. I was having a look at women's strikers just because I genuinely think the meta could be there fairly early. And there's a Zambian striker called Kudananji, and she's from a Madrid club. Like, my knowledge of Liga F is very minimal, and I don't recognize the badge at all. And unless Real Madrid have signed a deal with somebody else and they can't use their badge, it's definitely not Real Madrid. And so there's going to be some weird, I think, wrinkles in the market where a player that's from a big club that also has a men's team is going to have an extra little kind of part of their price added on top, whereas you might be able to find some, especially, as you say, in the American Women's League, some really cheap but very good players, because you have to link them with other women's players from that league, and there's no way to kind of have a defense-attack hybrid with a men's and women's linked team. So it's definitely, I think, the biggest change we've had to the market is essentially introducing another 3-4 top leagues into the game, like on the same level as the Premier League and La Liga. It's that kind of impact on the market, but with these weird kind of links in. Obviously, you got the nation links, but then these club links, but not having the league links. And I definitely think it's going to be something to kind of it's going to be something to watch early doors. I actually think I initially thought women's players would be underpriced. Initially, I think people would go to the players that they know, which predominantly is the men's players, and then they would find the women's players, and when they start getting beaten by them and they start getting scored on a lot and start seeing them gritty on them, that's going to be I need to try out a couple of these women's players. But I'm getting more to the idea that I think people are going to move towards, I think, kind of the leagues that you don't usually see a lot, like even something like the Super League, the Turkish league, has got some amazing players in it. They've been buying like crazy this summer. Obviously, Saudi League is going to be a league that no one's really used before. And then I definitely think people will start building their starter teams, at least their starter attacks, made up of quite a few women's players, especially ones that they can link in. So yeah, it's going to be really, really fascinating to see how it affects the market and how that moves from the web app into the full game, or into early release and then into the full release.
Yeah, and actually another point to make about the NWSL is that there are a lot of US nation players, if that makes sense. So it's going to be somewhat easier to link. What I see a lot of people saying is that the women's players are going to be underpriced at the start, that people will underrate them. And also, actually, on top of that, there's a consideration, Nate, that, well, actually, if there are a lot more top-end players, then prices should theoretically be lower because the coins are spread further. How do you see that kind of panning out? Do you have any predictions?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Especially with all the inclusion of these new women's players, we just have a lot more players that are higher rated and a lot more players that are pretty meta as well, looking at least stat-wise. And I think that's going to divide people's interests a good amount across the board. And EA is taking position modifiers out of packs. They're adding a lot of these players in, so we feel like players are going to be in packs more often, a little bit. Not that I think that's going to impact the market a ton, but yeah, it's going to be a whole new world with all these new players added in, and especially, well, we always know that people go for the cream of the crop. They go for what's the most meta and popular, and those are going to definitely carry a higher price tag. But yeah, there's just so many changes coming this year with the new players that it's kind of going to be another unknown.
Yeah, because of what we've been talking about, I think that is the biggest thing that will help you before the game launches. Getting familiar with all the new players in the game, particularly those women's players, how they connect together chemistry-wise, maybe finding some cores of players that you can use in your squad, not necessarily a full team. And yeah, we'll talk more next week, I think, about the database once we have it available. But sites like FUT.gg should have the full thing relatively soon, hopefully, after you're listening to this, if not already. And let's move on to the FIFA point question. Not particularly interesting for Josh, Nate, and myself as long-term non-FIFA point spenders or RTG runners. But Japes, I know you were potentially thinking you wouldn't actually spend on points this year, although you had done pretty consistently previously.
Yeah, I think right now I'm leaning towards not doing it this cycle. I think generally the logic behind doing so is like quite simple in my mind. And it's, do I end up enjoying the time that I spend playing the game more by having access to more coins earlier on? And what I mean is, if you spend, say you spend $100 on points and you play 100 hours of the game, are you going to get $1 worth of $1 more per hour worth of enjoyment out of the game if you're able to access additional players, or get access to additional coins, or not have to grind the same way? If the answer is yes, then like that's super cheap entertainment. It's super cheap. If the answer is like no, it's going to have no impact, then like you're probably not a points person. So I think for me, I'm not sure how impactful they were last year, like in the same way. And I think it's just now when I sit down to play the game, I'm kind of like, I'll just play with like whoever I have. It's fine. Versus being like, I want to play with these players. I want to get access to icons. I want to win. Now I'm more along the lines of like, if I'm going to sit down to play, like I kind of just want to like relax and play. And I don't need the best players to be able to do that. So the utility that I'm getting out of the additional spend on points is less, making the equation more challenging to buy into for me.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact is that, yeah, you have to put in time, but I don't think it's completely crazy. But without being a top player, a top trader, you can really build a competitive team. It might be harder to reach the very pinnacle players, but in general, you're still going to be able to use a lot of players that you like. And really, it seems like the end of the cycle now is a bit of a free-for-all anyway. So there's always that point in time if there are specific players you just really want to use and you're happy to wait.
Yeah, I think we even saw it this last year that with the way objectives and SBCs and the content that we get on a daily and a weekly basis has evolved, like you can create a competitive team spending more time, albeit, but going that route of free to play for sure. And then like Jape said too, if you spend a lot of time playing FC, well, I almost said FIFA, but if you spend a lot of time playing Ultimate Team and, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm going to go, spend money on golf clubs if I like golfing, to get maybe a little bit better at golf type of thing. It's just like a hobby, if you're spending a lot of time on it, then the spend of actual money, if you want to, is not, it's not bad. Just up to you.
Yeah, and I think the one final point I'd make on it, with that in mind, it's important to say that if you have any concern that you might, even a small concern that you might feel pulled into spending more than is perhaps manageable for you, then just don't spend FC points.
Yeah.
I think that's just the simplest way to think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be sure that you can set limits and that you can abide by those limits. And when I say that, it's not how much you've spent that evening, for example. It's really how much you're spending over a longer period, because that's what catches people out. The fact that they've spent much more that cycle or that month than they can, maybe afford, but also wanted to spend really. And if you can't track that, if you don't have it maybe in a banking app or something along those lines, you can easily end up spending more than you wanted to, more than you intended to, because it's not clear how much you have spent and whether you are overspending over a longer period. And if you have any concerns about that, then quite simply, do not spend. And I think that's definitely the way to go. And there'll be plenty of people doing similar, I'm sure, in the Sport Discord, maybe for the first time. And of course, many on the podcast as well. Right, we should move on to dates and get into it, because first of all, we have the web app, or we should do, which I think is likely to be with the Ultimate Edition coming on the 22nd. It's going to be the Wednesday before, which is the 20th. Does that sound right, Nate?
That lines up with what's happened in the past couple of years in terms of like when the regular release is. Usually it's like the week and a half before. Yeah, like the week and a half before on a Wednesday. I'm pretty sure in the last couple of years, it's always been like a Wednesday time frame when they've dropped that, coinciding with Team of the Week 1. So yeah, it's not confirmed yet, but if there was a date for it to come out, I think that would be the time.
Yeah, and then it doesn't leave us that long, I guess, until the 22nd.
Thank goodness.
Which is when the Ultimate Edition comes out, and that will be, I guess, late Thursday night, essentially midnight Thursday night, for being able to play that.
It's usually midnight or 1 a.m. I've found, but in the past you used to be able to download it if you set your location to New Zealand at like 4 p.m. or something UK time.
Yeah, I think it still works on Xbox.
That's so intense.
Those extra hours make all the difference. But yeah, it's usually midnight. That would be when I'd be setting my timer for.
Yeah, and actually, it's not just Ultimate Edition. There is still EA Play, I believe, which will give you 10 hours of playtime if you're spending already on EA Play, or you want to spend £4 rather than the, I guess, cost difference between Standard and Ultimate. You'll then get 10 hours to play before full release, which is on the 29th for those who've gone for the Standard Edition. Is there anything else kind of date-wise to look out for that I've missed? I guess there's going to be that promo, isn't there, during that window? Between the 22nd and the 29th, the Nike one, or Nike, sorry, NA listeners.
It is Nike. Like, I just want to throw it out there that if you listen to anybody from the company say it, they say Nike.
Yeah, absolutely right. But you don't say 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝘀𝘀 for bike, do you? That's what
you had a nightmare.
Yeah. And also, it's worth noting that actually, I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong about this, Josh, that people would be able to engage with that Nike campaign between the 22nd and 29th if they're accessing the web app, right? You wouldn't be able to complete the objectives because they'll be presumably gameplay related, but certainly you've got a chance of, packing one of the players' first owner if you're somehow opening packs on the web app without going on the game. And you've got those 10 hours potentially anyway, so you could, if you've got EA Play, to play the 10 hours. If you were adding FIFA points, you could add them on. So I guess, there is an opportunity to engage with it to some extent.
There is, potentially. I don't know if we know exactly what the makeup of the promo is going to be. Are the cards going to be in packs? If so, then yeah, you can absolutely engage with it on the web app. I do feel like there's going to be quite good rewards in objectives for it, just because they then might encourage people to go, oh, go on then, I'll go on EA Play and get my 10 hours early so I can log in. I do have a feeling that, because it's the first time I think that we've ever had a promo that's just for people with early access. We've had like early access of gameplay objectives and that kind of stuff before, but never a full promo. So yeah, it's something that I think we're going to have to see when it comes. We're going to have to see how worthwhile it is doing. But if you haven't got the Ultimate Edition, which is perfectly fine, it may well be worth just getting those 10 hours with EA Play. Make sure you cancel your subscription so it doesn't roll on month after month like I've done this year. And just make sure that you can get those things done. If that's something that you really care about and you're on a budget, it'll definitely be cheaper than buying the Ultimate Edition for sure. So it's going to be one of those that we're just going to have to see what it's like when it arrives, because it might not be worth doing that for.
Yeah, that's true. You can always take a look, and obviously, those 10 hours, you have the full week essentially to use them, I think, which is quite a good window. I'm not sure there's that much confirmed information about EA Play as well, so maybe there might be some slight quirks about that, because obviously previously you haven't been able to access it so far ahead of the actual launch. And then I guess we go back now to the web app. Just quickly, Nate, it doesn't seem like I don't think we're going to have that much time on the web app, maybe 24 hours or so. Are there any particular bits of advice that you would give people? Or even if it's just to say, if you're not interested in trading, just open your starter packs, potentially build a team if you want to, and leave it at that.
Yeah, thank goodness. The last year, FIFA 23, we had 5 or 6 days of web app before we could get on to the early release access, and that was a pain. But yeah, definitely for the start of the web app, picking that starter nation is always something that people kind of debate over. I wouldn't spend much more than a minute thinking about it because, regardless of whether you pick one or two of the top best nations, you're probably going to end up in around the same place, but just pick one that you think would be good for doing SBCs. Shouts for Brazil, Netherlands, Germany, all good nations.
Germany's been quite useful for an SBC that they've put out as a starter SBC, right?
True.
In the past. So that could be worth, just if you're not sure, just go to Germany because it has helped, I think, with one of those early SBCs. But yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, usually the thing to do is go straight to the store. I know you have a little loan trick, which I'll let you talk about, but I go straight to the store, and then I'm assuming just like every other year of Ultimate Team, even though it's going from FIFA to FC, we will still have those, engagement user reward packs, which if you've played FIFA this last year or in years past, multiple years on the same account, they usually have some engagement rewards that they'll give out. Usually it's 4 or 5 or 6 packs, depending on how long you've played. And those aren't too bad and actually can get you off and running. So I would get those open as fast as possible. And then that starts your club. That gets you off the ground for doing some of those starter and advanced SBCs and potentially getting a few coins to your name so you can look at the market a bit as well if you wish.
Yeah, and I believe, Josh, previously the badge and kit that you could select, they were actually tradable, right? So
they are indeed, yeah.
A bit of a meta to pick top teams and then just discard it afterwards.
Yeah, so if you can pick, the order in which I would do it is if they are a major club, you're talking Manchester United, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and I can't think of any other major clubs really. Those kind of kits and badges, they're the kits and badges you should pick because the chances are they're going to be in the thousands of coins. The second thing I would prioritize is rare gold. Now, you're not going to know that straight away, but you can kind of use a bit of intuition. If they're a major league, if they're a bigger club, the chances are their kits and badge are going to be rare gold. And the reason that's important is if it's not selling, you can discard it for 460 to 500 coins. So for those 3 choices that you can just swap for the bronze kits and badges that you'll have in your club just from doing those starter SBCs, you've got 1,500 coins off the bat at the bare minimum. And you'll always get a rare gold option in those choices. I've never seen one that doesn't have a rare gold option.
Yeah, and then generally I'd go around just quick selling as much as you can that you won't need. Anything that you can get coins out of is worth doing. I have a little loan trick that I like to use. You can actually change the position, or at least in the past, you could change the position that you swapped on the pitch, and it would actually give you different options. So, if you go to a right back spot, it will show you right backs. If you go to the bench, I think it's a little bit random. But personally, I like to go through the different options and then find a lower rated player with high pace who has a decent number of loan games, and generally actually looking for a pacey centre back particularly because they tend to be quite expensive at the start and are very, very useful. So that's a good way to get a little bit of a boost to your starter squad. Obviously you want to consider chemistry to some extent with that player, but actually as long as they're a player you can get good chemistry on, you'll probably end up buying some players to fit around them anyway. And then I guess we get into completing SBCs. Personally, I often avoid doing it on the web app just because I find it a little bit of a pain. But if you have a lot of time on the web app, you could go through, certainly, obviously, the basic SBCs, really straightforward. You might as well do them on the web app. But even the advanced ones, if you can complete them with what you can buy, what you have in your club, then I guess it makes sense to work through those. I don't know whether, Josh, you have any further advice on the SBCs, the advanced ones?
Yeah, mainly not to overspend unless you absolutely have to, because that time of the game is there's a high demand for the cards that complete certain SBCs. The reason why I would always go Germany at the beginning of the game is because you need a German striker, usually a German striker or CDM, to complete one of the foundation SBCs, the bronze one. And if you don't have one, they usually cost like 1,000 coins for a bronze German striker just so that you complete it. Now, it may be they change it, but this is EA and they haven't changed it for the last 6 years. So the chances are it's going to be exactly the same. So that would be my biggest thing, is don't overspend. But if you go to complete an SBC and notice that any bronze right mid is expensive, that is a trading opportunity. That's something I would then look at and just start searching. Where is the line? And then just search it open and look what's being bought with a minute to go, because people are lazy and will just buy to complete an SBC without trying to get the absolute cheapest price. And that can then become a trading opportunity for you, at the beginning of the web app in terms of a low coin total. But yeah, don't spend all your coins completing a section of a foundation SBC, because the rewards are all untradeable. So you're much better off going and trying to maybe do a bit of trading, maybe even do a bit of bronze pack method if bronzes are expensive, and then packing the player or making the coins to then buy the player so that you're not losing out. I think it's really easy to overspend early game, and you're much better waiting off until the full game release.
I want to say a really big thing as well. Remember that position change consumables don't exist, so you can move the players around and they will just change position, and that'll allow you to complete some SBCs that you basically just wouldn't have done last year because you'd have to use a position change consumable. So it's going to be very satisfying to do that, and it is going to work. So yeah, it's helpful to know that and remember it. And then, am I right in thinking, Nate, that the 4,600 FIFA points wasn't something that would appear on the web app, right? You had to go onto the game to get that.
Yeah, I believe those first showed up when you logged on to the full game for the first time. So like for a lot of us during the Ultimate Edition last year, when you get your pre-order FIFA points, or you do get your pre-order FIFA points when you load in for the first time. Yep.
Fine. And that obviously means that there's a bit of parity. People aren't spending FIFA points, or FC points, we should be calling them, I suppose, at that point, right? Which means you can potentially, especially actually if you hit an inform, right? Because informs discard for 10k, whoever they are, or even if they're a ridiculously valuable player, just quick sell them, recover them, make sure you set a reminder, recover them in 6 days' time once you, I'm sure, have 10k. But use that 10k, because potentially with the small amount of coins that are out there, you can get some bargains. You don't want to spend ages probably poring over the web app, when sometimes you might be better off just putting your time into the full release of the game. But it can be a way to get a bit of a head start, right?
Absolutely. Last year during the web app, actually, from one of those tradable welcome backpacks, I hit Duarte, I think was his name, center back, Portuguese center back in La Liga, inform, quick sold him for 10k, and that helped me get off the ground and running, because I had 10,000 coins immediately. I had that quick sell recover value to get the player if I wanted to back again, and then yeah, I could go back out onto the market and start trading and flipping things. And I mean, I remember seeing inform Kevin De Bruyne on the first day of the web app last year was like 60 or 70,000 coins the first day. And then every day as it goes on, people start to get more coins. And then of course, as we get onto the Ultimate Edition, as people are getting on the full game and can play games, then your gameplay demand kicks in, and prices for those meta cards just explode. And he was up at like 400,000 or 500,000 coins, I think, 2 or 3 weeks later. But yeah, that first day on the web app, after you open all those packs and get the coins you can get, everything is really cheap, because there's nobody playing games. It's just everybody doing their welcome backpacks, trying to get those SBCs done. Some bronze cards, like you mentioned, Josh, are going for more coins than like 83s and 84s, because that's what people are, that's the demand. That's where people are at.
And I think there's a big lesson in what you just said there as well. If you are lucky enough to hit a big player, unless you are willing to invest a lot of time trading, you are much better off just holding that player until the game releases, at least like 2 or 3 days after the game releases, before you sell. If you hit a big inform or a very meta player, that player is going to make more coins sat in your club than you would do trading, unless you are like dedicating a lot of time to it.
Yeah,
it's not even a lot of time. It's like how good are you at it?
Yeah,
like I used to, people, gosh, early on when I was doing YouTube more like full time, people used to always say, I packed whatever player, when should I sell them?
Oh, that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed one bit.
I'm sure it hasn't changed. I'm sure it hasn't. It's one of the dumbest questions that can be asked. And what I mean is like, it's an impossible question for me to answer. There are so many variables involved. It's like, one, are you good? How well do you know the market? Are you good at trading? Do you feel like you can invest the time into it? I don't know how quickly this player is going to appreciate in value. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many factors in it that it's like the most horrible question. As any content, I'm sure you get it all the time on stream. I packed Benzema. When should I sell him? I don't know. Why don't you play with him?
Yep, exactly. That question happens a lot at the beginning of the year, and for good measure, because coins are so important, and there's just the idea that you have to be the most efficient, and you have to be perfect to start the game off well and in the right way. So
the other thing that I will say is, like, if you are not going to trade, but you pack a player that's of high value, if you like, sometimes what I'll do is I don't know, say I pack a 50K player. And there are 2 20K players that I think are also going to appreciate in value. Maybe not perhaps buy as much, but they're 2 20K players like at that point in time that I would like to play with. Like in that instance, I may very well just sell and immediately buy those players and let those players appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of opportunity cost type of situations that will happen in the first couple of days as well, where you pack a player, or you have a certain amount of coins. You're like, okay, I want to play with X player in my team, and I also want to see my coin balance appreciate. So maybe you have to try to, if you have those 2 motivations, figuring out what you're going to do is always interesting.
I would say as well, once you get onto the game, gameplay is the thing you should focus on, especially if you've got early access, because it's the thing that the people that don't have early access don't have access to. And so you can get ahead by playing those games, getting those objectives done quickly, and beginning to get a feel for how the game plays. Because, whilst there isn't a massive difference in rewards, if you can get higher up the divisions, you're going to get better division rivals rewards. You're going to get better champs rewards because you'll have played the game more. So definitely, at the end of the day, like, it's about having fun and like playing football on the game. So like, play football on the game.
Yeah, that actually leads us nicely onto what we're talking about in part 2 after the break, which will be what to do when you get on the console itself. And we'll do that just after this. Hello, listeners. I'm sure you've heard me talk before about how supporting the pod keeps it going, and you can get double the podcast content if you join up for just £3 a month. But also, you can win 36,000 FIFA points because there is a giveaway going on the Patreon at the moment. If you would like to enter, then you can just search support FUT Weekly. If you do choose to support, a huge thank you for keeping the podcast going, and it is very much appreciated. Again, just search support FUT Weekly. Right, let's get back into the podcast. Welcome back after the break. Right, let's dive into what happens after the web app, and as we get into the meat of EA FC 24. And we start with early access on the 22nd, as mentioned. For some people, this will be 10 hours. For some people, it will be unlimited access, the full game. Just quickly, for people who are doing the 10 hours, do people have any recommendations for what you should do with those 10 hours? Obviously, use the web app companion app as much as possible, so you're treasuring those 10 hours that you actually have on the game. But what gameplay should people focus on? I guess we're getting access to the game on a Friday, basically. So the first rewards would be on Sunday. So I don't know, Nate, would you say actually jump on and do some squad battles if you have 10 hours just to get some rewards so you can use them on the web app?
Yeah, I would probably start there, especially always with a new game. You think squad battles is the easiest place to go to get a feel for the gameplay before you maybe take yourself to the online grind. But obviously a lot of people are, very good at the game, so they can go straight into rivals too. But I would say squad battles just for the rewards might be the best place to go. And you kind of mentioned it there, but it's kind of weird this year for the whole start of the game cycle. We're not talking about the 10-hour EA play as near as much as we have in previous years because they moved the early release date up so far that it just happens at the same time. That's kind of a weird one this year.
Yeah, that's true. Josh, anything to add?
One thing I would say is that you can see objectives on the web app. And so as much as you're going into squad battles games, if you're really wanting to kind of maximize completing as much as possible, it sounds really sad, but just getting a bit of a plan of what you need to complete in those first few games, so that the reality is you want to play squad battles to the point that you're going to get some rewards and, you know, get used to the game a little bit, but also you're going to have a lot of those starter objectives of just playing games, scoring goals. You know, if you want to play on amateur and just bang out as many goals as possible, you can do that. But having a plan, essentially using everything the web app can offer, because the only thing really access to the game offers that the web app doesn't is going to be the ability to play the game. And so it's about maximizing that time you get playing the game. Definitely make sure you get wins in rivals, because I don't think you'll have enough time. It doesn't release, does it, until the following Friday. So that first Rivals rewards on the Thursday, you'll need to make sure you get your Rivals wins in, and try and climb the divisions. But yeah, it's the playing the game that you have the advantage of when you're actually on that 10-hour early access. And so maximizing that time by using all the information you have, not using that time, is the most important thing. Also, don't leave it sat on the menu like I did last year and lose any time.
A very good point, yeah. And actually, a quick point on those objectives. There are often some that you can bash out really quickly with a friend, right?
Yes.
So that's worth thinking about too. James, I think in the past for those 10 hours you've done draft, right? I mean, obviously you're a better player than average, so that helps. But
I mean, I think once upon a time I was probably better than average, Ben. I think
I'm sure
nowadays I'm like better than average, yeah. But like once upon a time, I felt, you know, strong enough to go into draft. I think now you have to remember that if you're going to go into draft, you're going to be playing against like probably top 5% of players that are super committed, believe in their own ability. So you're going to have some like really, really challenging games. If you really want to be like, think about it, I think you just need to budget your time to like, how am I going to maximize the, I guess like packs that I can open in that amount of time via gameplay only. So you have squad battles, which remind, like squad battles is now 4-minute halves, right? So
good point. Yeah.
A little bit less time there. You definitely should try to get placed up as high as you can in divisional rivals, because those rewards get better. In my mind. And then like last year there was some what was it, moments content, I believe, that you could get like some really easy packs like very, very quickly. Also worth considering. But yeah, I mean, if you draft's fun too. If you're trying to figure out what players you want to actually have in your squad, you get to try a bunch of them and you get to try out some new formations and stuff. And you can certainly learn the game that way, but like there are stakes involved with that, right? So I would say nowadays I probably won't go into draft until I feel confident in my ability to finish. I've never not felt confident in my ability to create chances or to defend, but generally speaking, finishing is the one thing that I always am kind of like, until I feel confident that I can put a one-on-one, away every time, or I know which shot to take in a specific situation. Like that I'll probably try to get a feel for this year before heading into draft.
Yeah, I definitely recommend some squad battles games on lower difficulty to get used to some of the keeper mechanics, because yes, the keepers are easier on lower difficulty, but it does still help, I think. And then let's move on to people who have unlimited time. And I think even if you do and you've got your 4,600 FC points, because of the quality of player during the Ultimate Edition release, I would kind of say it probably still is going to be very difficult unless you're consistently a top-ranked player in Champs, for example, or Elite Division. It does get a bit easier actually if you save some points for the full release of the game, because people come on and they're just not that familiar with the gameplay, so you can have an advantage there. As James pointed out, it gives you a chance to try some different players, but it's probably not worth committing many FIFA points to that, because realistically, getting those points into coins early, Nate, is probably what's recommended.
Yeah, I completely see what you're saying. I think spending them all on the packs at the beginning is the way to go. If I had to put my 2 cents on it, if you're going to go into draft with the FIFA points, I would say if you're like a rank 3 consistent player or above, then it might be worth your time, because that's kind of the risk, right? It's like I could get 50K in K-Packs.
Well, I was going to say,
go ahead.
I'm inclined to like agree with you here in a sense. That when I've done draft and used the points that way, it is a time commitment, dude.
Oh yeah.
To go through that many points just on draft, you're not playing rivals at that point. You're not playing squad battles.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, I'm leaning towards. Yeah, I think Nate's on the right track here. I'll let you finish, but like I think you're right.
I just think it's for the time value of what you get back for coins too. If you just rip your 4,600 FIFA points all for packs right away, then you've got coins and you can go do whatever you want, and then maybe buy a couple players for your team and then start grinding rivals if you want to get into competitive gameplay right away. But yeah, just like you mentioned, the time for the draft would take a long time. Maybe there's a happy medium where you can say, I'm going to open 3,600 FIFA points of draft and save enough. Was it 350 for a draft or 300 FIFA points?
300,
so it's like,
I think.
Then you got 3 drafts left, or maybe you work it out so you can get 4 and then have all your FIFA points used or something. But yeah, I just think that the opening the packs straight away gets you the coins the fastest. And there's even a couple other advantages to doing that, I think, too.
Yeah, one thing I would say is draft offline, the rewards are slightly worse, but you can choose any difficulty and the rewards are the same. So that could be worth a bit of AFK or away from console time just to improve your pack offering slightly, I guess.
Yeah, just going to echo, but I think opening up the packs right away, you put your squad in a much better position to have some solid players, to where you're like, and when you go rivals or squad battles versus draft, you're de-risking the chance of getting trash packs in a sense. Like you're increasing the likelihood that you at least know the level of packs that you're going to get from doing that, which to me, if it's a quest for 1 million, that feels like the smarter move off the jump. But if you're taking a very near term, what can I do in this first week mindset, on the flip side, if you're saying, well, I'm going to play a bunch of drafts over the course of the year and I don't want to put real money on the game, maybe you just open like 1,000 points worth of stuff and then you save the like 3,600 points or whatever for drafts down the road. Because it's not like when you play drafts down the road, the players in those packs aren't going to be worth anything. Like there's still the players that are yet to be packed are still going up in value. If that makes sense.
I would echo what's been said. I definitely think that opening the pack straight away, if your goal is just to kind of maximize those coins very quickly and get a good team together, that is useful. I think for me, there's a slight alternative, which is maybe open some of them straight away, but I would try and complete lots of the objectives. Go and get those bronze and silver squads with a mate if you've got one that you can kind of jump into a friendlies and bash those out, because you're going to get a whole load of packs with a whole load of players in them. And it may be that your team is at a position where actually you don't necessarily need to massively improve it with coins at that point. So you don't need to go and waste all of those FIFA points on 7.5K packs if that's all that's available. It wasn't too far into the year where we started getting big packs released into the game, which from a coin value were expensive, but from a FIFA point value were incredibly cheap. And it may be worth, if you're planning not to put, if you're somebody who just buys the Ultimate Edition and then doesn't put FIFA points on like myself, it may be worth holding 2,000, 3,000 FIFA points just further down the line when they release one of those big packs, or, you got a chance at going and getting a pack that was maybe 300, 400,000 coins, but you can do it for 1,000 FIFA points. That might be something that's worth considering and taking the time to do. I do think that if you are confident enough that you can get past the first round consistently in draft, which, only half people that enter a draft will go past the first round. But if you think you can do that, it is worth doing it for the FIFA point versus what you get back. That's those second round rewards, even if you lose after in the second round, are usually a 7.5k pack and a 15k pack, or a 7.5k pack and a 12.5k pack, which is better than if you're just spending it on the 7.5k packs. But again, that's something for you to dictate based off where you think your skill is, because that early access is the elite of the elites playing the game, and it can be very hard for if you're just getting 11 wins and that's your kind of limit, it's going to be quite difficult, I think, going into draft at that point.
I think that makes sense. Let's put you on the spot then, Josh. What is your plan going into that first week? How will that week pan out, do you think?
So a lot of it will be dictated off of web app and what I get from my starter packs. But I tend to, the moment I get the game, go into objectives and just try and complete all of the objectives I can to get the 500 goals, 500 assists, get the bronze and silvers out of the way. I'll usually have somebody that I'll do that with, so that I kind of I don't have anything to think about then in terms of objectives. At that point, I'll have a team that I can put together, and I'll go in and immediately play a bunch of rivals games, mainly to get out the divisions, but also just to get a feel of the game and start doing it. I won't spend my points until I finished kind of that second bit of rivals, until I get to the point where I go, okay, I've kind of hit the limit of how good I am at this point, and I now need to consider, am I going to go back into trying to trade an awful lot? Do I want to go and open my packs? But I tend not to touch my FIFA points for quite a while, actually, after I get on the game, and concentrate mainly on the stuff that you can complete with time, because that's the advantage you have over everybody who's not done it.
That's a good point.
I do like, on the flip side, though, there is something fun about rolling the dice on your FIFA points, like straight off the jump, because that first week of informs tend to be like pretty rare and like can appreciate quite drastically. And even if you get one of the bad ones, like, I don't know, 10k like off the start, gets you access to gets you access to some players that you might really, really want in your squad that might be not affordable down the road.
Yeah, getting in early on players can be a good way of having good players in your team, but also potentially seeing those rise as people build to the amount of coins that you have and can then afford that player. And there's the inflation that goes on early in the cycle. So yeah, that is an advantage of spending first. And I think if you're in doubt, that is probably the thing to do, right? Now, let's move on to talking about Evoloutions, a big new feature this cycle and something that we want to be aware of at launch, although it's hard to know exactly how it's going to impact things. But basically, with Evoloutions, if you didn't know already, you're able to upgrade players. There'll be limited slots that you can unlock with coins or FIFA points, or they may actually be free. And there'll be requirements on those slots which restrict the player you can actually put into them. You'll do objectives and things, and the player will get upgraded. Josh, is there anything we should consider going into playing the game about Evoloutions, do you think?
One thing I would say with Evoloutions is don't dive straight into, I can use this player and evolve this player and I'm just going to do that straight away. Because from the kind of rumors and leaks that I've seen, the bandings of who you can choose is going to be quite wide. If it's any silver player, don't just use your best silver player you have at that moment, because it may be that there's the obvious choice to upgrade. Say I was looking at Joelinton's stats earlier, and he just looks unbelievable. And if he can fit into an evolution, it might be worth waiting an extra 3, 4, 5 days, going to pick him up and then putting him in the evolution instead of just using a random midfielder in your club. Don't burn those evolutions immediately just because you can, because I think there's a big potential you'll miss out on having a really nice, overpowered card early in the game if you do that.
I agree with that too, because especially as we learn about what evolution is going to be worth doing, the longer that it's there and the longer that we figure it out and have time to, the more fine-tuned we're going to get with it, especially at the beginning. What we know about the evolution day one, maybe by week 2, it's really obvious that this sort of player works the best in this evolution and can be, leveled up the most or look the best after being evolved type of thing. So yeah, that'll be a learning curve this year too.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Thinking about who you're going to evolve is really important. There'll be some people who know the player they're going to evolve because they love the player and they want them to be better, which makes sense. But for a lot of these, you're going to be able to finesse them essentially and pick players that really are going to help your team a lot and going to improve a lot. And also, I guess for chemistry, are going to be helpful to you too. And it's worth thinking about that before diving into it, because you'll only have, well, a limited number of slots out there that you can put players into. But not only that, you can only evolve one player at a time. So you've got to consider that it's going to be quite a time commitment to evolve a player all the way, probably. And then, you move on to the next player. But it's definitely a good point to wait and see, or to just be cautious about it. And we're working on tools at the moment, actually, for FUT.gg, so that people can be well informed about the upgrade.
Until you have like a pretty good sense of the direction you want to take your squad, like be cautious. I know for me personally, I tend to switch around squads a lot early, trying to find like a system and like players that I like. I am probably gonna like hold off on the evolution until like as long as I can. I doubt the first evolutions are going to be so meaningful that we feel the need to do them like right away. I could be wrong, but it feels like that would be the wrong type of power curve boost from the jump. For my brain, I'm looking at like center backs, left back, right back, and saying, like, 𝘬𝘃𝗲𝗏? Can I evolve keepers from the start? I would be perfectly happy going out and buying one of the top keepers in the game, spending the coins on them, and then just evolving them. Can I do that? I don't know.
I also wonder, because I think most of the rumors I've seen have been around like it being a cap on the rating, but I also wonder if we're going to get caps on stats as well. So if there's an evolution that's going to be like +5 pace, that one of the requirements of the player is they can't have more than 78 pace. And so then
for sure.
And I think that's what I mean about don't just choose a player that fits because you've got them. There might be a player that's got 78 pace and is just underneath the rating cap that actually is going to be a really good player once you complete the evolution path with them. It is the part of the game I'm most excited for. Like,
yeah,
I just hope it goes well. I just hope it's done well.
It's easy to be excited for because it feels like right now, endless possibilities. Do you know what I mean? Like once they put like real feeling constrictions around it, everybody's like hopes and dreams of what they thought it was going to be mean or be to them could very well be dashed. So like I'm also, I mean, I don't mean to be like a super negative Nancy here. I'm in the same boat where like this could be really, really cool having played this game now for a decade plus. Like I'm very, very well prepared for it to not be, especially in the first year, as quote unquote like cool as I'd say like the majority of us are hoping it will be.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see what they do in terms of requirements, in terms of the actual upgrades, and it's really going to make or break the feature, basically. It's also going to create very much meta options, I think, players that people realize are going to be ideal for that particular evolution. And Nate, I guess from a trading perspective, it creates a lot of opportunity, actually.
Yeah, just as in a similarity to cards that people want to buy for their teams to, use them in game because they're meta, like the community often latches around, certain cards that get really hyped up because of certain attributes or stats and how they play in game. I would imagine that probably would find its way into evolutions as well. Some people will be like, wow, this player fits this evolution the best and it's going to be an insane card. And that could impact their price on the market a little bit. I mean, obviously, if it's a silver, then, the ceiling is usually capped at 10K. So, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely think it's going to impact the market.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And actually, this doesn't completely wrap up the coverage, even though this episode has been a long one. We'll be talking more on the supporter episode, but is there anything anyone wants to slip in at the end here?
I definitely think there's one other thing that I would talk about when you're playing the game early, which is testing out playstyles, because they're the other massive addition to the game, and finding out which playstyles, and I'm not just talking about playstyles plus, but the ones that are underneath that are a little bit more difficult to find, finding the ones of those that suit the way you play the game and are the most overpowered at the beginning. It's going to be great in terms of like investing in players, if that's what you want to do, if you want to invest in early access into full release, so that you know kind of who's going to end up being meta because they've got this playstyle, whether it's Trickster or Speed Dribbler or Power Shot. I definitely think it's one of those things where even if a player doesn't fit your team, just give them a little bit of a run out just to see what does a playstyle do. Can you actually feel the effect of it, or is it something that's a little bit too subtle for people to really care too much about? It's one of those things that, and there's also, I've seen a few people talk about applying playstyles as if they're chem styles, which isn't going to be a thing. I think you can add a playstyle through Evoloutions at some point, but the playstyles are going to be already built into the card. It's not going to be something you can apply.
Yeah. I know that's a misconception. We're actually thinking, Josh, I was chatting to you about doing a podcast, which is just running through things that people may not know going into 24, because there's just so much that's changed the cycle. And I think people will spend a lot of their time in the first week just getting their heads around what it is that's changed and how things are different, because there's a huge amount that people have to contend with, I think.
Definitely.
I think that's where we'll wrap up this podcast on getting started in FC 24, but we'll be talking about it more on the Patreon feeds for supporters, and you can catch that episode and every other supporter episode, that's double the podcast content, over on the Patreon feed. You can find that just by searching Support FUT Weekly. It's just £3 a month. So we can say thank you to our guests here for coming on this episode. First of all, thank you very much to Nate. And if people want to follow the market, I mean, your YouTube channel is the place to go. And also Twitch, of course.
Yeah, Twitch, YouTube, the FUT Accountant is where you can find me. We'll be following the market a lot from day one throughout the whole entire year, honestly. But especially right at the beginning, it's pretty frantic and fun as we all get off the ground running and try to figure out, as we pack stuff and start our ultimate teams, what's the best way to go.
Indeed. And Josh as well, people can catch your progress, I'm sure, over on Twitter or X.
Yeah, I'll be on Twitter at JoshXLS_. So yeah, I may start streaming again. We'll see how much time I've got, but yeah, the streams may return.
Nice. And finally to Japes. Yeah, thank you very much for giving your insights on this podcast. Always interested to know what you're going to be up to in that first week or so.
Thank you much, Ben. The fun part about that is I too am always interested in what I'm going to be up to for the first week or so, because what is it, like everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, something like that. It's not that the game necessarily throws you like something bad, but like you could end up with like a great card, and then everything goes out the window, and you're like, I don't like, this was not part of the plan. What do I do?
Totally
so it's always fun just to see how it plays out, what happens. So I'm looking forward to it again this year. I think it's going to be a great cycle. So I'm pretty excited about it this year and eager to get started.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to it. And hopefully everyone out there is too. If you would like to catch these podcasts directly in your podcast feed, then do subscribe via the various different podcast platforms and on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, then do leave a like, drop a comment. It definitely helps out. And talking of helping out, thank you very much to all those supporters out there who keep this podcast running, including those icon patrons: Dave B, 𝘬𝘬𝘦, Coach Vass, DJ FIFA Player, Alan G, Alistair, Anthony R, Dominic P, Rob P, Jeff B, Michael K, Stephen F, Tom B, Damon H, David S, Nick Jack M, Eric T, Neil P, Adam G, 𝘚𝘃𝗲𝗏, Dan W, Waterman, N Hagman, Harry A, Jake G, Roger D, Springford, Alec, Bracco, Nishant, Harry P, Alex M, Lee A, Brendan W, Andrew C, Joe W, Timothy J, Dylan, J Kell, Ibis24, Adam R, Sam K, Graham W, Andy, Ads H2K, and Brian V. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, 𝘬𝘬𝘦, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add, though. FIFA's a bit like life, really. It has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.